I have a question about CP. You've been a direct recipient of this, but with him and with shooters in particular. So he was like this with you in LA, is like this with Book, obviously in Phoenix, his whole career. How long do you think it generally takes him to kind of figure out um the chemistry there in terms of feeding them in the right way? And Steph talked about this, like he's known and worked out with Steph his whole career, his whole life. But like in terms of gameplay, how long to just sort of get that mesh comfortable?
I don't think it takes long at all for Chris because he watches basketball and consumes basketball 24 hours a day. He is one of the smartest players that I ever played with, probably the smartest player I played with. And I think it won't take time at all. And, you bring up Book and that connection. You bring up the connection with me. There's a graphic that has been around on social media. Most assists to a teammate in a single season leading to a three-pointer. Me and Chris one season had 121 where he assisted to me on threes. I don't know that he breaks that record this year, but there's going to be a lot of not that there wasn't already. There's going to be a lot of off-ball movement.
Yeah.
And, CP will eventually figure out who he wants to play pick and roll with. It's not like people are going to come off Clay and Steph in terms of pick and roll. They're going to try to play that action 2v2. So I think a lot of these assists will come out of movement sets where Clay and Steph are off the ball. And CP, he can dissect defenses that way.
Well, I was going to say they were having this, ESPN convo earlier in the summer about Steph. Is Steph the greatest point guard of all time? Blah, blah, blah. Like we haven't seen Steph like this. We haven't seen Steph in this position where he is, he's going to get the ball when he wants, but he has the ability to, play the first half off the ball a little bit. So what do you sort of expect in terms of like his approach in terms of making sure he's getting his shots and everything like that when he's not necessarily, isn't necessarily walking the ball up the floor?
It's interesting. There's a responsibility. We've had guys talk about this on the podcast. I remember Darius Garland specifically talking about feeling out the game, knowing when certain teammates need shots, and knowing when he can be aggressive offensively. I think Chris has done that better than anyone that I've ever seen. And it's interesting because I think back to a game I called, I believe it was in January, maybe it was earlier in November. I called a bunch of Warriors game in the first half of the season. And Clay was going through a little bit of a shooting slump. And obviously Clay ended up having a fantastic season and ended up shooting the shit out of the ball for most of it. But during this stretch, he was struggling and he was forcing a little bit. And I called the game in the first quarter of that game. I think Steph took one shot. There was such a concerted effort to find Clay in transition, to make the extra pass, to go to that split action and go screen for Clay. Let's get Clay going. He recognized that. Well, now that you have CP, Steph doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
That's someone else's
Steph
problem.
can just go be a killer.
Yeah.
And not to say Steph won't play and function as a point guard at times. I'm not saying that. But that responsibility that I think he did have at times, every point guard has it. Some of that responsibility will now be on Chris, who has done it his whole career and is comfortable doing it. So I'm excited to see how this dynamic works. I think it'll be fascinating. Welcome to the Old Man of the Three with JJ Reddick and Tommy Alter. This is episode 174. Andre Igudola and Evan Turner.
Yeah. He can pass the rock.
No, like hubs. I loved playing with hubs.
We were 4 deep.
4 deep.
We had like 6 guys, but that year was interesting. Bogut had like he did something to his rib.
Was it in the series or did he get hurt before the series? I can't remember.
It might have been before. It was something.
Bogut was always hurt.
Yeah, and Bogut didn't play that series. And
that's right.
Somebody else, DeAndre Jordan, set a rebounding record. And we had it was a very interesting relationship between coaching staff and David Lee. And they was like, why people always get rebounding records on you? And so Draymond started playing a lot that series. That was like,
oh yeah.
Draymond's like, he started to like be like, oh, okay, I'm okay, I'm here. Like, I got expectations now. Like, I'm good.
I want to ask you about this because I told Draymond on the podcast this, and so like I'm not gonna offend him when I say this, but I remember towards the end of the regular season that year, I had been out from like early February to like the last 5 games. And so during that stretch we played you guys, I think it was in March, and he was getting some run.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, this guy has got to be the worst rotation player in the NBA. What does he do? I didn't understand his genius, his intellect, his defensive just skill set. I didn't understand any of it. And speaking of hubs, there's another hub for you, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't doing that shit yet.
He wasn't, yeah.
Did you see any of that with Draymond early on? I'm talking about like rookie year, second year, before that playoff series, and of course before training camp the next year when you guys, when David got hurt.
I knew he was good defensively, but I didn't know he was that good defensively. I didn't know he was that good defensively until one day in practice, he got to my shot a few times. I'm like, how is he almost blocking my shot? And I'm like a pride guy. If you block if you get your jump shot blocked, it's a terrible shot unless it's the end of the shot clock. So if you get your shot blocked as a jump shooter, you're a ball hog. Like, I'm like, bro, pass the ball. There's no way you should get your jump shot blocked. And he kept almost blocking my shot. I'm like, I got so much space. Like, that's when I realized he has like a 7'3" wingspan. I'm like, oh, Draymond's like 6'5".
Facts.
Which is even crazier. Like, it raises your level of respect for him. And so it was like that practice. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And when I would watch him talk in the pregame speeches or in like scouts, I'm like, okay, he at home studying.
Yeah.
And when you see guys do that, you know how there's different NBA guys. There's guys that, and that's that fine line. That's the difference between like the good and the great.
Yeah.
That's everybody. Like, no, everybody's good in the NBA. It's just that who's locked in and then who's not getting the most out of themselves. And Draymond was one of the guys that went that extra. There's only a few extra like centimeters, and then it seems like a mile of a difference at the end of the year when you win a championship. It's crazy. He was just always locked in. Now on the other side of it, sometimes with the Warriors coming at the halftime locker room, I be like, yo, will y'all tighten up, please? Like, we got our total game turnovers at halftime. You know, we always had a turnover problem.
Yep.
We were last in the league last year in turnovers. It means we turned the ball over second most in the league. It's like, yo, man, stop handing another team the ball and the game would be over. And so now I got to do the reverse, like lock in. And so in one place it's like, yo, just relax. We worked hard enough, we good. And then, but on the other side it was like, yo, we know we gonna win, but come on, let's lock in. We had to have those conversations a lot. So it was, that balance is, man.
So the balance you're talking about from the outside is one thing I've always been fascinated by with the Warriors. And specifically, I think it's mostly Steph, Clay, and Draymond, where, yeah, you want at times to be like, let's tighten up. But with Steph, you want him the space and the freedom to be creative. Clay, you want him hunting at all times. Draymond does some wild shit on the court, and that's part of his game. And I mean, but not just like fouling people. I'm talking about like he throws some wild passes sometimes, right? Sometimes his rotations, you're like, dude, you're overhelping. What are you doing? But like he sees something maybe you don't see. So you have to allow those three guys a lot of stuff. I think at times, this is not a knock on Jordan Poole. I think sometimes at times, like with Jordan, it was like, okay, you can't then come in the game and be doing that stuff.
Bingo.
Right? And that's not a knock on him, because on most teams, you're like, dude, you're fucking great. We need you to do this role. But at times on your team, it was a nuisance.
Correct. And I think that's why CP is going to help them more than some folks know, maybe more than the team knows. Not to say they don't know, but it also, it was a hindrance to Jordan Poole. Because Jordan's like, why can't I go out there and be free like them? You know, yeah, he doesn't have 4 rings. He has 1. And he did win us a game in the finals. He did do that, game 5.
Yeah, game 5.
And so he coming back like, no, I've shown y'all that. Give me some freedom. And I'm second on the team in scoring.
Average 20.4.
He was second on the team in scoring. So why should I be the guy
that has to dial it back?
Like all those emotions, he's a real human being. So he's like, nah, I'm doing what I do. I've been sacrificing. I don't know.
When you bring up Jordan Poole, do you think like part of culture is kind of like the standard structure? I know like the Warrior stuff is kind of like already cemented clearly how it is, but I don't know about you, but there's no system where you're going to be terrible at defense, terrible at offense. I mean, or in assist or ball movement, and then we're going to try to beat the team up the street. Like, that don't add up. So, like, eventually when Jordan Poole's coming down, it's like, nah, like, if I wasn't good enough, y'all tell me to take a hike. But now I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and I won a ring. My job ain't to hit the road.
Yeah.
It's to get them boys up out of there.
Yeah.
This isn't the guy you substitute. It's the ones you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the second leading scorer on that team, bro. That's tough because it's somebody trying to be the leading scorer on that mug.
This is true. This is true. And
am I wrong for saying that, JJ?
No. I think there's a little bit to unpack there. I'm going to let him unpack the Jordan Poole part.
those things can kill you at the end of the day as a team. And so we talk about Jordan Poole, bro. I compare it to the JaVale McGee situation with Shaq and the Fool. And I played with JaVale on 2 different teams. So I've seen his work ethic. I've seen him lock in. I've seen him dominate games. I've seen his moments where he's 7'1" and his falls look so awkward that it's a funny in the moment and then it's magnified, and then now you're taking one moment away from his 20 minutes where he actually played good. And Jordan Poole had defensive moments last year. And that's my brother. Like, I would be like, bro, like, I'm about to flip sides with these fans. if you fall on purpose one more time to not play defense, I had this joke. And he's my brother. He's my brother. He knows this. Like, I love him to death. But I would tell him, Jordan, it looks like you're trying not to try. Do you know how much energy it takes to try to not to try? It takes less energy to try. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
And so,
I know exactly what you're saying.
But then it was, it looked like it could have been a rebel in there. Like, no, man, I'm second on the team in scoring. And you know how we grew up when we first got in the league? If you were a bucket, you got to take off on the other end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.